Welcome back, everyone. I have a lot in store for us today. We're going to be making an almond butter cake from scratch. This cake is packed with flavor and so moist. Before we get started, can I just show y'all this super cute apron that I made myself yesterday? Oh my gosh, how adorable. And it's double-sided. Okay, back to cakes. So about this cake, as I mentioned, it's made from scratch. That just means it's going to need a little extra love when it comes to the prepping and mixing stages. Now don't let that scare you. I'm going to walk us through and explain quite a bit to you today. Let's go ahead and talk about our ingredients. I've broken these down into 4 different steps so that it's easier to follow. We have our dry, our wet, our whipped, and our creamed. Let's start with our dry ingredients. You'll need 1½ cups of all-purpose flour and 1½ cups of cake flour. It's super important that you don't just use 3 cups of all-purpose flour. This will give you a super dense, gummy cake, and that is the last thing that you want. You'll also notice that I use a small kitchen scale when I'm measuring out my flour. I measure out 200 grams of each. But if you don't have a kitchen scale, go ahead and use the cup measurements. Just make sure that you're not packing your flour into those cups. Our next dry ingredient is a 1/4 cup of instant vanilla pudding. Make sure it's the instant that you're getting. A tablespoon of baking powder and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. You'll also need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. For the wet ingredients, we're using 1½ cups of buttermilk, 1 tablespoon of almond emulsion. It's important that you use the almond emulsion and not an almond extract or flavoring. We'll also be using 2 whole eggs. For our whipped ingredients, you'll need 4 large egg whites, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and a teaspoon of cream of tartar. You can find the cream of tartar in the seasoning aisle. It's very popular and not difficult to find at all. For our creamed ingredients, you'll need 2 cups of sugar, a cup of butter at room temp, 2 tablespoons of almond paste. You can find almond paste in the baking aisle. This stuff is packed with flavor and provides an additional oil for our cake. Okay, so this is where you're going to understand what I mean when I say I've listed the ingredients according to their steps. So let's actually start making this cake. We'll start by combining all our dry ingredients into a medium bowl. Just gently stir them with a whisk until everything is nice and evenly blended. Next, in a large pourable measuring pitcher, I'll whisk together all my wet ingredients until my whole eggs are very well combined. It's important to break up and combine the egg in this step so that you can reduce the mixing after adding the dry ingredients later, because overmixing the dry ingredients will cause too much gluten to develop and it will lead to a tough, gummy texture. So in your mixing bowl with the paddle attachment, you'll start to cream together your sugar, butter, and almond paste until it's nice and fluffy. Then, in a grease-free mixing bowl, we'll whip the egg whites until they start to get nice and fluffy. It's super important that you use a grease-free mixing bowl. Now, I have 2, so I just swap out between the 2. But if you don't, perhaps you can just use a separate bowl and a handheld mixer. When my egg whites start to get fluffy, without stopping my mixer, I'll gently sprinkle in the tablespoon of sugar and the ½ teaspoon of cream of tartar. And I just continue to whip it on high until stiff peaks form. Then I take this bowl off the mixer, I set it aside, and I replace my bowl with the creamed ingredients and reattach my paddle attachment. Now it's time to alternate the dry and wet ingredients. You add about 1/3 of the dry, and on a super low speed, you'll just turn about 7 or 8 turns of your mixer until your dry ingredients are well incorporated. And you'll stop and add about 1/3 of your wet ingredients. You'll continue this until all the dry and wet ingredients are used. Once everything seems to be nice and combined without over mixing, we'll stop our mixer, take our egg whites, and gently fold half of the egg whites in with the spatula at a time. So add half the egg whites, fold it in, add the other half, fold it in, and whenever you don't see any more white streaks, that's it. You're ready to put the batter in the pans. I'm using 2 10-inch pans for this cake, and I sprayed each pan liberally with my baking spray. Then I'll evenly spread the batter in each pan and wrap my pans with my pre-soaked baking strips. Now it's time to put the cakes in the oven. We'll bake the cakes at 335 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes. You can check for doneness by inserting a toothpick into the center. If it comes out clean, it's ready. Once my cakes are baked, they are immediately prepped for storage. Refer to my linked short video if you'd like to see how all my cakes are given the royal treatment after they are baked. This is truly a game changer. So it's a new day, and it also happens to be Nurses Week. We're going to be frosting our almond butter cake with a cookies and cream buttercream, and then we're going to decorate it with a bunch of fun different nurse things. I'll do my best to show you a good bit of detail on how I created all the edible decorations. But first, we need to make our frosting and put this cake together. For the frosting, you will need 1 cup of salted butter at room temp, 4 ounces of cream cheese at room temp, 8 cups of powdered sugar, 8 to 12 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 20 to 30 Oreo cookies. You'll crush the Oreo cookies in a Ziploc bag if you're using the frosting as a filling between the cake layers, but if you're using it as an outer frosting, you'll deconstruct the Oreos, you'll pulse the cookies in a food processor, and then you'll add the creamy center to the next part where we cream the butter and cream cheese. So let's start by creaming the butter and cream cheese. Beat these together until they're nice and smooth for about 2 to 3 minutes, stopping at least once to scrape the bottom of your bowl. Once everything is nice, fluffy, and smooth, you'll add the powdered sugar. It's recommended that you sift the sugar into your mixing bowl to help prevent clumps. Add about 6 tablespoons of heavy cream to start, and the vanilla. As the frosting creams, continue adding additional heavy cream until you reach your desired thickness. I typically use a little more cream when using the cookies that I pulsed into a fine crumb. Continue mixing for about 3 to 4 minutes. Now that I have my filling frosting and my outer frosting made, we're going to be stacking and filling each cake. If you need a more detailed explanation on how I stack, fill, and crumb coat all my cakes, please refer to my cream cheese buttercream video, link in the description. We're creating a 2-tiered offset cake, but before we stack our tiers, let's cover them in fondant. So I'm going to get out my fondant mats. I bought these many years ago when I was struggling to cover large cakes with fondant, and I don't know what I would do without them. The name is literally the mat. I have a small one that can cover up to about a 10-inch cake, and a professional size one that can cover about 18 to 20-inch cakes. You simply sandwich your fondant between the mats, roll it out to the size you need, and once you have the size and thickness you want, you remove the top mat, and the fondant just kind of hangs onto the other. It allows me to place the mat over the cake. And then I start to help the fondant release from the mat, and it just kind of gently falls into place. From here, you'll slowly smooth your fondant around the cake, starting from the top and working your way down. Okay, so both my cakes are covered in fondant and they're chilling in the fridge. Now it's time to work on some of our decorations. I'll take you back to about a week ago whenever I first decided to make this cake. I knew I wanted to include a nurse's cap. You know, the kind that we don't really wear anymore, but they're kind of iconic. I knew I needed to make this ahead of time to allow the hollowed center to dry and hold its shape. I covered a 3-inch half circle in fondant and used a good bit of Tylose powder when rolling out and creating my shape. Adding Tylose powder to fondant is my go-to when I'm low on gum paste and I don't need a super thin result. I then used a template that I created on my silhouette program to cut out the front part of my cat and the red cross. For the pill bottle, I cut out a rectangle, tight rolled a paper towel to help me get a cylinder shape, sealed my ends and added the bottom. Then I created a medication label using an icing sheet and edible marker. Snoozatol XL, extra long, extra lazy. I might have been having too much fun, y'all. I cut out my band-aids, also from my template, and then added a bit of realism to them by adding a gauze pad and breathing holes to each side. It's now time to stack the tiers. I'll be placing the bottom cake towards the back of my cake board and the top tier towards the back of the bottom cake. My cakes are just under 5 inches tall, and I happen to have 5-inch wooden dowels. I measure out where I want my top tier to sit, ensuring that I mark the center. Then I add the 5-inch dowels around the center, and I hammer the dowels into the cake board so that I know it's not going anywhere during transport. I have an 8-inch dowel that I add to the center. I pre-punched a hole into my 6-inch cake board so that I know exactly where to place my top tier. This also connects the 2 tiers so that the top tier doesn't fly off during transport. Now all that's left is adding the decorations. I thought it'd be cool if I put a cardiac rhythm strip around the entire bottom tier, but there's no way I could just eyeball that, so I knew I'd have to rely on some of my decorating tricks. I once again turned to my silhouette program to design a strip at the size and height on my cake that I wanted. Then I printed that out and pulled out my 6-inch acetate roll. I used a clay extruder with a circle tip. Don't worry, I've only ever used this on cakes, so no cross-contamination here. But this allows me to create a long, even fondant string. After I have my string, I use a bit of Crisco on my acetate and trace my rhythm strip, making sure to line up the bottom of my paper with the bottom of my acetate. After all my strips were made, I added them to the cake with the help of a little smear of water, which creates sort of a glue for the strip. I added a red heart at the front center and then finished surrounding the cake with the rhythm strip. Next, I hand rolled and shaped a stethoscope. I just kind of went off my personal knowledge for the shape, but there are tons of pictures online if you need to get ideas. I temporarily added my nurse's cap to the top to help me get the position correct. I'm holding off until tomorrow morning when I deliver the cake to secure the cap with white chocolate because I don't want to chance the humidity from refrigeration softening my cap. Because of the weight of some of the parts of the stethoscope that dangled, I had to use a little bit of water to secure the different pieces in place. I then used a silicone mold to form a trim and added that next. All that's left is adding my pill bottle, pills, and band-aids. I secured all these with tiny dabs of melted white chocolate, since the pills are Tic Tacs and wouldn't stick to the cake with water. There you have it, my completed nursing cake. To all the nurses out there, you are truly a blessing. And even on the days where burnout is real, I promise you are making a difference.